Link TV, connecting you to the world. Link TV is viewer supported. Watch more at linktv.org.
I'm Faith Morgan, and Pat and I co-produced the film, The Power of Community, How Cuba Survived Peak Oil.
My name is Pat Murphy. I've been working on solutions for peak oil and climate change for about 7 years. When I learned that Cuba had gone through the peak oil crisis, Faith and I went there to visit, and we went a second time to tour the island. And then we took a camera crew down to capture that experience of how they dealt with the sudden fall off in the availability of cheap oil.
Once we got there, I was struck by the hardships they'd gone through, and I'd never had any experience like that. So I started thinking right away this would be a really important to document.
Early part of the 1990s, Russia cut off their oil shipments to Cuba. And just a few weeks, they suddenly went from having enough oil to having incredible shortages.
If you can imagine what it would be like to not have oil all of a sudden and not be able to drive and not get oil food shipments.
After the Soviet Union, oil import dropped from 14 million tons a year to only 4.
And they went through a period of 5 to 10 years of deprivation, and then they reduced their consumption in all areas of life and then created a sustainable society, but at a much lower consumption of oil.
The lack of fuel drove us to have a very big shortage of food.
Food is such a major thing. There were people in the Cuban society who'd been looking at organic agriculture and could see the problems with industrial agriculture. So when they didn't have oil any longer and they didn't have fossil fuel inputs and fertilizer, the government actually went to these groups and said, show us what to do. And within 18 months, they had converted the entire country to organic agriculture and using animal traction because they didn't have tractors and gasoline.
When Cuba began abandoning the industrial model, they also were looking at the cost of transportation for food. So they tried very much to grow the food as close to where people lived as possible. And in Havana in particular, they used every square foot of land that was within the Havana boundaries to grow their food.
More than 50% of the total vegetable needs of the Havana's population, 2.2 million inhabitants, is supplied by the urban agriculture.
Peak oil is a term used to describe the year when oil production reaches its maximum. At that point, oil reservoirs have been depleted and the world will be facing declining availability of oil every year.
People often wonder how Americans will do and ask us. I think that there's community all over the United States, and people will rally together as communities to help each other and support each other and find creative new ways to survive as things become more difficult.
There are infinite small solutions. You fix one little problem here, one little problem there, and life is better. You think globally, you act locally.
Since the Cuba film really focused on food, our next film that we're doing right now is focusing on the German Passive House, which reduced heating and cooling energy by 80 to 90%. And we have our first one in Ohio built here in Yellow Springs. And we're really excited about getting that information out in our next film. We really do believe that solutions will come out of individuals, that each person's choices do make a difference. And we really encourage people to become more aware and thoughtful in their use of energy.
Link TV is the only U.S. network dedicated to global and national news, uncompromising documentaries, and diverse cultural programs. Programs which connect you to the world. To learn more, visit linktv.org.